At the pinnacle of his power, a man risks losing control. The world is not kind, so its kings become cruel. Murder is never mercy, it's never noble, and it's never redeemable. To the maniac, murder is an art form.
What is happening? For God say something.
Welcome back to Visited by Voices Live. I'm not sure why I'm doing this live, to be completely honest with you. This is a subject that I probably could handle conventionally in a recorded video in 5 minutes, but I'm probably going to spew like an hour on a subject because I'm not really terribly prepared. And I didn't give a lot of warning that we'd be out here tonight. It's just me. Got off work with some ideas in my head that I needed to get out there. So, Sam, if you're out there, it's not that I didn't invite you. It's just I didn't really plan this. But if you're out there listening, thanks for joining me tonight. Subject is a pretty simple and pretty familiar one, but it's also kind of gotten a pretty big exclamation point on it this week. And that really is Mili. So Mili is a brand new film that is Indian, and I know already the drinking game can start. Lauren's talking about an Indian movie. But this year has been a remarkable year for Indian cinema in particular. And Z Studios, the ZEE, has kind of become the A24 of Indian genre films. Now, they work in a lot of different genres, not just horror. In fact, this isn't even my favorite film they've released this year. They released the best action film I think probably ever made. Certainly the most satisfying to me. And what I love about Z also is that they've really embraced the genre they're working in. And what I mean by that is that if you're making a dumb action film, a kinetic, fast-paced, overly complex action film, you make that movie. You don't quote unquote elevate it necessarily as much as you just go bring it to the highest level it can go and still be what it is, right? A lot of people complain that A24 with something like Hereditary or The Witch or Saint Maud kind of overstep the genre and their goals are bigger than the genre, and it works for me, right? Because everyone knows I'm a big A24 fan. But I think in a way, Z Studios have an even better formula in that they really embrace, but just do the best job inside the tropes rather than circumvent the tropes. And I kind of love that they are able to do this. Now, full disclosure here, Mili is not precisely a horror film, though any horror fan in the world would enjoy this, I think. Maybe not without some complaints culturally, but it is primarily a film about how to survive a really awful situation. Adam Green's film Frozen, right, about the people that are stuck on the ski lift, is in the same genre as this, exactly. It's about people who fall into a circumstance and must survive it, come what may. I guess in a way you could say Crawl is also like that, though, or the much better Thai film, The Pool. But to be honest with you, I think when you have an obvious aggressive antagonist in the film, and in both cases those are crocodilians, it kind of changes the formula. Here it's one person against an environment they find themselves in. And here's the thing. So much of American cinema misses the mark because we don't care about the characters or actively dislike them. Millie spends 40 minutes setting up a character and the kind of precarious situation her life has gone into. And it does so in a way, I think it's a very compelling story. But it's not in any way relevant to the horror that comes later, except that now we care, right? In American cinema, we tend to only interject those elements that we're going to pay off directly inside the plot, not that shade color and draw us into the story, but it has to actually have a plot point. It is, very much the, hey, go ahead, keep that lighter. I have another one. And in the final act, that lighter is going to play a key important role. This film actually has that lighter in it. But what it's there to represent and the resonance it has is not glib and self-serving and stupid. It's actually really emotional and pretty amazing what it does. The other thing I really loved watching this film is that you think you're ahead of the film at every step. You think, oh, I would do this, I would do that. And the film very cleverly lets Millie take a little bit of time to come to your answers, but she comes to them all, and they all fail. But you have that moment where you think you're smarter than the movie, and then the movie kind of like takes its time to get there and lets you go, okay, so you do this, huh? How does that work for you? It's a film that, because we care about the character and the escalating horror, it has a ticking time clock, even though we're not exactly sure, when that clock is up, right? We don't know exactly when a person freezes to death in an industrial freezer. And that's what this movie is. I haven't actually said what this movie is about. This is about a young lady who's working in a fast food restaurant in a mall, who, through a series of misadventures, ends up both locked in the walk-in freezer after the store has been closed and locked for the night. And also, in addition to that, both her kind of secret boyfriend and her father and her best friend all have very reasonable assumptions about where she would be. So none of them are particularly thinking she's locked in a freezer in her workplace in the middle of the night. So it's a situation where you care about the character. It's a compelling situation. And you can all too much believe in the scenario that is created here. It is not some really fantastical scenario. Now, in America, the freezer would have fail-safes and you would not be able to be locked in it the way it is. At least hypothetically. I've known some places that have walk-in freezers and you're told literally, yeah, that doesn't always work. But in general, what's portrayed here would not happen. But it doesn't mean it wouldn't happen elsewhere. And if you can put yourself in that situation, which I certainly had no problem putting myself into, damn, it works. And it's brutal. It's funny that this movie opens with a fairly obvious CGI ant running through the main character's bedroom, and the camera follows it. And then out of her bedroom and throughout the house, we follow this CGI ant. And it's a very obvious CGI at the end. And you might think, oh, well, that's not a good sign. But what's really clever about it is that's the last instance where a special effect looks glaringly like a special effect. So everything later, which is, I believe, all practical makeup, and I don't mean like foam latex, and I mean just this is makeup, like cosmetics, but used very, very cleverly to simulate, a darker pallor, and then redness and puffiness, and ultimately the onset of frostbite. The change of colors of lips, which is done very subtly. The movie really is a masterclass in makeup as an effect. Not makeup effects, but makeup as an effect. Also, the lead performance is just unfriggin' real. I really don't even know how to describe the performance. I'm going to mispronounce this, but Janhvi Kapoor is the actress, and I'm sorry for probably butchering your name if you're out there, because you're amazing. This performance is one for the ages. It is a classic horror performance. Again, is this a horror film for everyone? No. Some people are going to look at this and say, nope, not a horror film at all. But you know what? I don't know how else you classify this. What I've been saying to people is it's truly a suspense film, but we don't make suspense films anywhere in the world anymore. Pure suspense films don't really exist and haven't probably since the time of Hitchcock. This is probably that, but today that's not even a genre. So I think the horror fans are most likely to enjoy this. It's a stressful film. It's intense, and it's definitely got a nihilist streak to it. And that doesn't give away anything about it, but it really relishes the sense of hopelessness. And that's what I always talk about film. I want film to take me places that I don't normally feel in my regular day. It's just one of those cases where it's like, I can't feel these emotions safely. And the only way to feel them at all probably is really unsafe. So I think it's really good that a film like this can just nail those feelings and emotions and that anguish. Because as I said before, you come up with ideas in your head as an audience member, like, okay, this is what I would do. And as those things fail, you start to suddenly have this itching sensation in the back of your skull, like, wait, now I'm starting to think, I really might not have a way out of this. This might be really, really bad. And I think that is why I responded really solidly. This isn't my favorite film of the year. This isn't my top 10. Unfortunately, it did push David Cronenberg's Crimes of the Future out of my top 10. But it's not even in the top half of the top 10. But it's an amazing film. And we're in an amazing year in the cinema, especially in world cinema. And I think that the reason I wanted to spotlight this film so much, though, and give it its own little live episode is just that, man, we don't get movies like this ever. Like, ever. I mean, you look at some of my other favorite films of the year, like Moloch. We do get folk horror. It usually doesn't work, but we get folk horror. Moloch worked tremendously. But I don't worry that we'll never get another folk horror movie. You know you're going to get one or two a year, no matter what. But a pure situational horror suspense film, you get one every 10 years, maybe, right? I mean, again, Frozen would be an analog. I guess that movie where Ryan Reynolds gets buried in a coffin, which I've never seen, that's probably another analog here. But man, I think we have to support when films are doing things that are a little bit different than we get. And in this case, if you let the film take its time, which I understand American films always want, let's get the scary conflict right on page one. We want it within the first 5 minutes on screen, right? Whereas this film lets you know, it sets up the story, the characters, the dynamics, so that later on, when you were with the boyfriend or with the best friend or with the father, you completely understand their perspective. Even if you disagree with them, they seem like real human thought processes and responses. And as those characters start to get more desperate about the situation, when they start to realize what's going on and they're looking for her, and you realize that there's no reason they'd assume that she's in that freezer, you start to get paranoid about the situation. It starts to really raise your blood pressure because the movie's bothered to make everyone rational. Now, there are some unrational. There are characters that aren't rational in the film that serve as a secondary villain, and they're figures of authority in the film. And while one of them definitely is a mustache twirling villain, his character is so wonderfully banal. It's all too believable that someone could be so selfish and so indignant about their power, their little power, that they just dismiss any other concern, including a young lady's life. Well, that's believable to me. And while that character is definitely probably the broadest character of all of them, and his motivations are probably the most questionable, it still worked on a fundamental level. I think like when you have a Hans Gruber character, right? that's a pretty broad character, right? There's no real depth to that character, but it works perfectly for the setting and the drama that you drop him into in Die Hard. And that's exactly what the police chief here, his role is. It's not incompetence. And I think that's a fascinating film. There's two characters that you could see as villainous in this film. And they're both in authority figures. But neither one is actually incompetent. They're both just wrapped up in their world and what little power or little respect they have, they're just desperate to cling to. And I think that by having like human, relatable, even if you don't agree, and you shouldn't, inspirations for these characters, it really makes the movie work. Okay, I know I've been ignoring the chat, and I know that there's movement over there. So I just want to quickly say, Mike says that he works in retail with giant freezers, walk-in freezers. Yeah, I'm familiar, man. Nothing as large as what's in this film, but yeah. And there we go. Holiday Style says, I was like, Mili? And then I checked, it's Indian. Of course it's Indian. Lauren delves deeper than most. Here's the thing, man, and I'm not going to make any apologies for it. India is on fire in the genre. If you're not looking at Indian cinema film currently and you consider yourself a horror fan, I'm not saying you're not a horror fan, but you're doing yourself no favors, because the crap we get shoveled that people are trying to fixate on and trying to embrace, like the films they loved when they were young, it just doesn't cut it. I mean, if we're being honest, it doesn't cut it. And India is just destroying where we stand right now, and not just in this genre, but this is the genre I care about the most. Jessica says, I want to see this so bad. Well, it's currently in theaters, and a decent number of theaters too. So anything's possible. Mike says he's thought about this numerous times. Yes. Yeah. I think we all have thought about it, at least fleetingly. This movie gives you a good hour and 30 minutes in that freezer to experience it. Mike also says, when Lauren was on my stream the other week, the chat went fairly quiet, but the viewer count went up because when Lauren talks, people listen. Ooh. Wow. I don't know that that's true. I think people have strong reactions to me. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, but that's okay. I'd rather that than kind of a shrug and he's okay. So if you love me, that's great. If you hate me, that's great too, to be honest with you. I don't mind playing the villain every once in a while. That's good. Are you looking forward to the Troll Netflix movie? Probably not. But who knows? Okay, Jeff with a great question. So Mili is currently in theaters. If you have an AMC or a Regal near you, you have a good chance of it being in a theater. Now, Indian films don't stay at theaters long. So you really want to jump on that this week, next week, because you don't have a month. You just don't. This is not a Mission Impossible film. It's not going to stick around. It's not a Marvel DC thing. It's not Black Adam. So you have to jump on it when you see it. But check your listings, and especially those two chains. But if you dig a little bit deeper, movie theaters that are specifically Indian boutique theaters are popping up everywhere in the country. In recent months, Indian films have actually broken into the top 10 in American box office weekends, which it would have been unthinkable. I mean truly unthinkable up to this point. I don't think there's another point where there was an Indian film that actually broke through as much as, say, RRR did this year, which I liked RRR, but I like this movie a whole lot more. So there we go. Where can you watch it? That's where you can see it right now. However, there was a big splash screen at the beginning of this movie that said that their digital partner is Netflix. So when this film is available for streaming, which I would guess probably January. Netflix you'll be able to watch it. Now, here's the problem. It's not going to appear on the front page of Netflix as an icon that you can just click. You're going to have to, highlight that magnifying glass and do a search for Mili. And it will come up at that point when the movie's available, and you can click it. And make sure before you push play, you go to options and turn on the subs. There's a tremendous lot of English in this movie. One of the plot points of this movie is that Mili is she's a nursing student who, after she graduates, she plans to move to Canada to make money to support her family, to her father, really. So she's learning English. That's part of the plot. So there's a lot of English in this movie, more than most Indian films, which usually have phrases here and there and lines here and there. Especially authority figures tend to use more English in films, and the lower castes tend to speak more of, in this case, Hindi, but it could be Telugu, or it could be Tamil. But this film is very accessible. And really, I mean, once she's in the freezer, like her side of the story, there's not a lot of dialogue. She's not exactly alone in the freezer. I don't want to spoil something, but she's not talking to anyone. The story with her friends and her family and her father and her boyfriend, that there's dialogue there, but again, a lot of it is in English. I would not be afraid about the language barrier on this one. I would still say turn on the subtitles because accents can throw some people, but Holiday Style says, just found this online, so I'm going to go watch it before you get into spoiler details or whatever. Thanks for the recommendation, Lynn. Holiday, then my work is done here. If one person watches this movie because I recommended it, I'm pretty happy. That said, I'm not going to spoil the movie. I've kind of discussed as much of the plot as I intend to, but someone caught me on their lunch break. I did read your entire message, but I'm not gonna read that out loud. Lauren blushing is nothing the world needs to see. There we go. BBV for life. Anyway, guys, I mean, I don't really have a lot more to say about this movie. I just I think I want to spend more time on this channel, kind of moving people towards not just independent or world cinema or anything like that, just things that I think are admirable for what they're doing. I really want cinema to slow down. I think that's my biggest thing, is that everything moves so fast in the American films. Like, to use the movie Crawl again as an example, like, watch that film again. It's like, it's inside the first, like, it's inside the credit sequence, I believe, that they're like, oh, there's a hurricane. You don't even know these characters. And the idea that we can set them up with some kind of shorthand while having drama already started, everything's just rushing at you, and you don't really care about the characters, and the situation seems like setup, right? It seems like some kind of cheap setup for fake drama. To me, anyway, that's what it feels like. And I'm just kind of like, at this point, a little bit frustrated with the fact that if you look at something like Terrifier 2, which I liked but didn't love, right? I kind of felt the same way I did about the original film, which is, it's fine, it's cool, it's not my thing, but I'm glad it's out there as a new thing for people. But still, the movie, it's I don't know, 5 hours long or whatever it is. It's probably 2.5 or something. But it can't wait to start telling a story. So it's like, from the very opening moment, it's like Art the Clown walking around in the coroner's office with a hole in his head, and then he kills someone like inside a minute on screen, which I get the point of, but it's like all of our films have to do that, right? They assume that we just get, I don't know, that that our minds will wander, that we have that little of attention span, and I'm not down for that. I'm not signing up for video games as movies. They're different forms. Maybe that's why comic book movies are so popular now, because comic books have always just gotten to the point real fast. And maybe that's what cinema has become. But for me, don't know. I would rather see less movies, but see movies, like things that feel like something, things that make me think or feel, or at least things that even when they don't succeed, I think about for a while afterwards. Nope is a great example. Jordan Peele's Nope is a movie that I like, but I feel like there's a much better film that was almost there, right? So I don't mind something like Nope being out, but something like Smile is a different story. Like that's just a failure on all levels except the unintentional comedy level, which if they'd intended to make a horror comedy, that would have been fine, but that was not their intent. But that movie went over 100 million this week, right? At the box office. So it was entirely successful. So Hollywood is not getting the message that we want our films to slow down and be more impactful. Watch the original Halloween again. Watch the original Friday the 13th. Watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre again. Those movies are not throwing shit at you from the 10-minute mark. They're not. They really, I mean, Halloween has the opening murder, sure. Friday the 13th has an opening murder, but then we slow down and we meet our characters and we live their lives a little bit before we, ramble on through the, by the numbers horror tropes, which we've all seen and we want them, but we'd like them to be impactful, to mean something. That's why the lighter in this movie is so good, because it's trope, it's a cliche, but they managed to make the cliche mean something, and that's kind of its own amazing piece of writing. I do want to just discuss that this film was, or at least mention, I don't know about discuss, but Matthew Cuddy Xavier is the director of the film, and this is actually a remake of his own movie. The first time this was made, it was titled Helen. Completely different production in a different language, but he remade the film in order to appeal to the larger Hindi audience in India, and also just because he came up with ways he thought he could improve the story. And that's a brilliant thing too, right? Because we remake great films in America. This is a film where the director said, I can do this better, and I can appeal to more people by doing it better, and I can do it in an accessible language. I think that's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. All right, guys. I didn't intend this to be an all-night event. Like I said, I probably should have just recorded 5 minutes of me talking about this movie. Chess, I'm not exactly sure that we can't get locked in, but I'm saying, yeah, I mean, there's a lot more safeguards. But I think that the other thing to keep in mind is this movie is based on a true story. They changed all the setting of the restaurant and all. That's all been changed because they would get their asses sued pretty huge. But the actual basic story is a true story. And the movie does kind of tell you that it's not based on any specific incident, because there's been several that they composited together. But mostly that's a CYA. When Helen came out, it was being a lot more brazen about like being based on an actual set of incidences. So unfortunately, we think we can't be locked in a freezer overnight, but all right, guys, I'm gonna call it a night. Thank you for joining me. I just wanted to step in and say hello. I know the channel's been slow recently, and I do apologize for that. I also apologize for the fact that every time you see me, you're going to see a book trailer, because you know what? I have a book coming out this month, and I need you guys to watch this trailer and try to convince yourselves you need to support me. How bad of shilling was that? I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to leave you with this.
In 1977, news anchorman Virgil Meadowlark had some kind of breakdown on national television. Started babbling, speaking in tongues. The network released a press release saying he'd had a stroke. Whatever happened, he never went back to broadcasting. Instead, that, he disappeared from public life for 3 years. Then, in 1980, he published a book, Perihelion. Bestseller right from the word go, which, by the way, is the first word of the first chapter. Go find yourself. It didn't stay just a book for all that long. Readers became converts. They pooled their money and bought a town, Meadowlark's childhood home, Badger, Wisconsin, and renamed it Perihelion. I run a company that does impossible things. Sometimes with words and smiles, sometimes with Kevlar vests and AR-15s. It all depends on the job. For this one, the Perihelion job, we're going to need more than communication skills and good aim. We're gonna need a fucking miracle.
Like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff.
What? Wait. What?
I watched like 3 movies from 2021.